Alright, for chapter 11, we're looking at menu engineering, and one of the things I pulled up just to kind of give you a little bit more frame of reference is the homework assignment. So if you notice here on the left, you have the homework assignment that is given to you for this chapter, and what I've done is I've just created a little menu engineering template and then put the homework information right here. Now what I'm going to do is do the first line of it with the skewered shrimp so you get an idea, and then I'll walk you through the rest of the formulas that you need to do. I also included up here how you get the information for each one of the columns and what you'll be doing. Then I'll tell you what you'll be doing for the other items over here. So I'm going to use the homework base as a baseline for the example using the first line of skewered shrimp, and then going from there you'll be responsible for completing the rest of the homework and turning it in. But hopefully this might help you give you a better frame of reference related to what it is we are doing in chapter 11. So the first thing that you'll notice right here, all the information is already placed in the template. I placed it in an Excel spreadsheet, and the very first thing that you need to do before you start moving on is calculate the total number sold that you're dealing with. So you'd come down here, and what you would do is you would go ahead and sum up all of the items that you are dealing with for that particular menu. So we would add up the skewered shrimp to the pork medallions to the ribeye to the herb chicken, the planked salmon, the beef stroganoff, the veal piccata, and the filet Oscar. You'd add up all the numbers sold, and you'd end up with an N, or a total number of portions sold, of 262. Now what this is going to do is help you move into the next part, which is the menu mix percentage here that you need to calculate for each item. And this is very similar to the popularity index, or the POP index that we've already figured out. So what you would do is you would take the 47 sold of your skewered shrimp and divide it by the total number of portions sold. And what that lets you know is that the skewered shrimp accounted for roughly 18% of the menu items portions sold for this period. Now the next thing that we would do after we do that is we have our item food cost, we have our item selling price. We'd need to figure out our item contribution margin. So just like I put up here, we would actually take E, which is the selling price, less the food cost. Now if you remember when we did break even with contribution margins, is the selling price minus the variable cost. Food costs essentially in this aspect represents your variable cost, because the more that you sell, the higher the cost, the total cost goes. So what you're finding is that now we are starting to use the same concepts that we've used earlier through the first roughly 6 chapters. A lot of those same concepts will repeat. So what we find here is that our selling price of $12.99 minus our food cost of $4.25 gives us an item contribution margin of $8.74. Now the next thing that we would do is we need to determine the total cost for that menu. So what we would do is we would now take D, which is the $4.25, and multiply it by B, which is the total number of items sold. And this is going to let us know that in order to produce the 47 skewered shrimp, it costs us as an establishment $199.75. Okay. The next thing we would do for this item is figure out its revenues, or how much sales it generated. So we'd come to E, which is the $12.99, and multiply it by the 47. Okay, we end up with $610.53. Now the next step, we need to figure out the menu item contribution margin. So what we would do is we would take F, the 874, multiplied by the number of items sold. So this lets us know that this menu item during this period helped to pay fixed costs and generate profit $410.78. Also, if you look and add, or you take the menu revenues less the menu costs, you should get the menu contribution margin. Okay, so now that we've done that, The next thing that we would actually be doing is calculating an M, or getting the menu contribution, and that would be right here. This item would be M. And what we would do is, in order to figure this out, we would take the sum of all the contribution margins on the menu. So once we figure out each space in column L, we would go ahead and figure out our M. Okay, and right now it's just listed as 41078, but every time we would fill in one of these numbers, this number would adjust. Okay. N we already have, which is here is our total. Now we would come to O. And I put an item O here just to kind of help for calculation purposes. And this item O would actually be our total contribution margin divided by the total number of items sold, which is the 262. So right now our item contribution margin, or our average contribution margin for the whole menu, is $1.57. However, remember, I just did the first line, so for each one of these you will find that as a number is put in here, these will change. Now coming to get Q, and what we would do is, with Q, we need to figure out how many menu items we're dealing with. And this isn't the total, this is actually the number of menu items. So we have 8 menu items. So we would come down here and we'd be dealing with 8. And Q is going to be equal to 1 divided by the number of menu items that we are dealing with. Then you're going to multiply that by 0.7. Now be sure to put 1 divided by the number of menu items in parentheses, so that's get calculated first, then multiply it by the 0.7. Now in this example we're dealing with 8.75% as the contribution margin, but again, this right here will have to be compared to all the other menu mix numbers, so they're all not currently there. Right? Once we have that piece of information, we can go ahead and start figuring out the rest. When you get to the contribution margin category, one of the key things to remember is this right here, contribution margin. We need to look at the contribution margin for this particular item, which was 874, and you'd have to compare it to the number here in O. So these two numbers would have to be compared in order to figure out your contribution margin category. If the skewered shrimp contribution margin number is higher than O, then this would be listed as high. If this contribution margin number is less than O, then you would just go ahead and mark it or identify it as low. Here with the next one, you have the menu mix category, and what you are going to do here is you're going to compare the menu mix percentage of your item or your skewered shrimp to item Q. And again, it's going to follow the same protocol. If this column C is higher than the number here in item Q, then this would be a high. If it is lower, it would be a low. Now, just to help you with some of the classifications, if you end up with a high and a high, this will be classified as a star. If you end up with a high, low, darn it. If you end up with a high, low, you end up with a puzzle. If you end up with a high, low, you end up with a puzzle. If you end up with a low, high, you end up with a plow horse. And if you end up with a low, you end up with a dog. This right here is taken pretty much straight from the BCG matrix, or the Boston Consulting Group matrix, something that you should have learned, I believe, in your marketing classes. And what it does is it gives you the opportunity to identify the strengths and weaknesses of a particular item and then make adjustments to try and make it more profitable. So an example, a high means it's a star. That, in other words, means has a high contribution margin. It helps contribute significantly to the bottom line. It has a high popularity index, or a high menu mix percentage, which means it's very popular. This is something that you don't want to mess with very much and leave pretty much the way it is. Just keep an eye on it to make sure it stays a star. Your next one, as far as item classification, it's very high in your contribution margin. In other words, it contributes very much to the bottom line, but it's not very popular right now. This is where you would need to have some kind of plan in place to increase its popularity, a marketing plan specifically. This is a lot of times where you'll find suggestive selling comes into play, items featured in certain areas on table tents, things like that, if you're looking at a food and beverage or a restaurant type of example. Low and high, it doesn't have a high contribution margin, doesn't contribute a lot individually to the bottom line. However, it's very popular. So I'm looking at it as far as an economy of scale. It is such a popular item, so many people get it. It doesn't give you a big contribution margin, but it's purchased at such a high volume that it helps cover a lot of your costs. Now with this right here, if it's that popular, a simple adjustment of the selling price might then turn it into a star, and then it could really, really help the establishment maintain a high level of profitability. Another way, besides just increasing the selling price, if you can identify a place where maybe you can decrease cost but still keep it as a high quality item that's going to maintain popularity, then you could also move it to a star. Now typically a dog should be removed from the menu, reevaluated because it's not popular, doesn't have a good pricing structure as far as selling price, doesn't have a good cost structure, so it's costing you money and it's not very popular, something that really shouldn't be on the menu. Reevaluate it, see if you could either get the price up or cost down, and then do certain things to increase its popularity. But typically you'll find that a lot of times dogs are removed from the menu. Hopefully this will help you get through the chapter on menu engineering, and just to kind of provide you with another little framework just to show you how things would adjust. And once you set up the Excel spreadsheet and know and understand where information should be pulled from, it should go relatively quickly. And here's where I want to show you. Once I hit enter, you'll find that O will change, and you notice that it jumped up. Also, to come down here, average food cost per item, this is where you would add up all the menu cost. So this would actually equal your menu cost, and divide that by your number sold. That will give you an average cost per item. Here, then you would take your menu cost and divide that by your menu revenues, and that'll give you a percentage there, so that you can see as well that also changed. Now here what we're dealing with, we have another set of numbers, but you still can't classify because you haven't done everything. You haven't done everything from the standpoint of your O to determine whether it's high or low. So I just wanted to give you another line of information to kind of help you get through it and show you how things should be done. Hopefully this can get you through menu engineering relatively simply and easily, so you can complete the homework. Also, take note that for Chapter 12, it's very simple. It's really just averages, kind of overall sales price averages and things like that, so no video will be posted for Chapter 12.